Imagine this. It's March 27th, 1964, a Friday, Good Friday. In Alaska, the day is winding down. People are leaving work, picking up last-minute groceries for the holiday weekend. In the small coastal town of Valdez, the harbor is quiet. The water is still. Then, at 5:36 p.m., the ground beneath your feet doesn't just shake. It doesn't just roll. It moves. For 4 minutes, not seconds. 4 full minutes. The longest 4 minutes in American history. This wasn't a normal earthquake. This was a 9.2 on the Richter scale, the second largest earthquake ever recorded on the planet, the largest ever recorded in North America. And it didn't just happen in Alaska, it happened from Alaska. The rupture was 1,000 miles long, 1,000 miles of the Earth's crust snapping like a dry twig. The entire state of Alaska lurched sideways. Some areas dropped 30 feet, others rose 30 feet. The land itself was deformed permanently. But here's the terrifying part. The earthquake itself was only the beginning. The real horror was just getting started. Because when the ground stops moving, the ocean doesn't. The displacement of that massive seafloor sent a wave. A wave that would travel at the speed of a jet airliner. A wave that would hit the coast of California almost 4 hours later. And no one saw it coming. In Valdez, the harbor didn't just flood, it collapsed. The soil beneath the docks turned to liquid. It liquefied. The entire waterfront, 30 acres of it, slid into the sea. Men, women, children, buildings, cars, all swallowed by the earth itself. In the town of Chenega, a wave 200 feet high wiped the village off the map. 23 of its 68 residents were killed, gone in seconds. But the story doesn't end in Alaska. The wave kept moving. It crossed the Pacific. It hit Oregon. It hit California. In Crescent City, California, a town known for its quiet fishing port, the water didn't rise gently. It came as a wall, 20 feet high. It destroyed 30 city blocks. It killed 11 people, most of them children. They were watching the first wave come in, thinking it was just a strange tide. They didn't run. This is the story of a disaster so massive, so powerful, that it reshaped the geography of a state and killed people 1,000 miles away. And most Americans have no idea it ever happened. They know Alaska has earthquakes. They don't know it had the biggest one. They don't know that the wave that started in Alaska ended in California. And they don't know that the same fault line is still active, still building pressure, still waiting. You are about to witness the reconstruction of that day. In AI, in detail, in horror, and in truth. Because the ground beneath California is not as solid as you think. Let's go back to Valdez. Not the Valdez you might know from the oil spill. The Valdez of 1964. A small, tight-knit community built on the edge of a fjord. The town was perched on a delta of sand and silt, a geological nightmare waiting to happen. And on Good Friday, it did.
When the shaking started, the ground didn't just crack, it turned to soup. This is a phenomenon called liquefaction. When intense shaking hits water-saturated soil, the grains lose contact with each other. The solid ground becomes a liquid. In Valdez, the entire waterfront, the docks, the cannery, the warehouses, the homes, all of it began to slide. Not slowly, in a matter of seconds. A massive block of earth, 4,000 feet long and 600 feet wide, detached from the mainland and began to sink into the bay. People who were standing on solid ground suddenly found themselves sliding downhill. Cars tumbled into the gap. A man named Jack, a dock worker, was thrown into the water as the pier collapsed beneath him. He watched as the buildings he had been standing next to just moments before vanished into the churning black water. He survived by clinging to a piece of debris. Others weren't so lucky. The slide created a local tsunami, a wave that rose and crashed into the remaining parts of the town. But this was just the appetizer. The real wave, the tectonic wave, was building out in the open ocean.
Now, let's talk about the science of what happened. The fault line that ruptured was the Aleutian megathrust. It's a subduction zone where the Pacific plate dives beneath the North American plate. For decades, the plates had been locked together, building up unimaginable pressure. On March 27, 1964, that pressure released. The Pacific plate lurched eastward and upward by as much as 30 feet. It lifted a massive column of water above it. That column became a wave. But the wave wasn't just one wave, it was a series of waves. And because the rupture was so long, over 600 miles, the wave radiated in every direction. It hit the Alaskan coastline within minutes. It hit the Hawaiian Islands hours later. And it hit the west coast of the United States, from Washington down to California, just after midnight. The people of Valdez didn't have a warning. There was no tsunami warning system in 1964. No sirens, no alerts. They only had the shaking. And when the shaking stopped, they thought it was over. They didn't know that the ocean had already been set in motion. They didn't know that the worst was still to come. The total death toll from the earthquake and tsunami was 131 people. 9 of them died directly from the shaking. The rest, 122 people, died from the water. And of those, 16 were in Alaska. 106 were in Oregon and California. The wave didn't care about state lines. It didn't care about borders. It just kept moving. And in Crescent City, California, a small town with no reason to fear an Alaskan earthquake, the wave was about to arrive. The wave left the Gulf of Alaska traveling at over 500 miles per hour. In the open ocean, it was barely noticeable, a gentle rise and fall, maybe a foot high. Ships passed over it without a second thought. But beneath the surface, the entire water column was moving. All the energy of a 9.2 magnitude earthquake compressed into a single pulse. As the wave approached the continental shelf off the coast of Oregon and California, it began to change. The seafloor rose, the waves slowed down. But as it slowed, it grew taller. The energy that had been spread across miles of ocean was now being compressed into a smaller and smaller space. The wave became a wall. The first sign of trouble came in Oregon. At 11:30 p.m., nearly 6 hours after the earthquake, the tide gauge at Newport recorded a sudden surge. Water rose and fell rapidly. Boats were torn from their moorings. Docks were damaged. But the worst was still to come. Further south, in Crescent City, California, the wave was about to make landfall. Crescent City is a small town on the northern coast of California, known for its lighthouse and its harbor. It had no reason to fear a tsunami. The last major tsunami to hit California was in 1812. No one alive had ever seen one. No one knew what to look for. At 11:15 p.m., the first wave arrived. It wasn't a giant wall of water. It was more like a rapid tide. The water rose, then receded. It rose again, then receded again. People came down to the harbor to watch. They thought it was a curiosity, a strange natural phenomenon. Some even walked out onto the exposed seafloor to collect stranded fish. They didn't know that the first waves were just the beginning. They didn't know that the real wave, the one carrying the full force of the Alaskan earthquake, was still coming. At 12:04 a.m. on March 28th, the main wave hit. It was 20 feet high. It didn't crash like a surf wave. It surged like a river. It pushed inland with the force of a freight train. It lifted houses off their foundations. It tossed cars like toys. It ripped entire buildings from the ground and carried them blocks inland. The downtown area of Crescent City was destroyed. 30 city blocks were reduced to rubble. 11 people died. Most of them were children. They had been watching the earlier waves from the shore. When the main wave came, they couldn't outrun it. One survivor described the sound, a deep, grinding roar, like rocks being crushed in a giant machine. Another survivor described the smell, salt, mud, gasoline, and the silence after. The water receded as fast as it had come, leaving behind a wasteland of splintered wood, twisted metal, and broken lives. The wave that started in Alaska had ended in California, but the story doesn't stop there. Because the same fault line that caused this disaster is still active. It's still building pressure. And scientists say it's only a matter of time before it happens again. After the water receded, after the bodies were counted, after the news crews left, something strange happened.
America forgot. Not the survivors. They would never forget. But the country as a whole, the collective memory, it just moved on. The 1964 Alaska earthquake became a footnote, a trivia question, a factoid in a textbook.
Why? Because it happened in Alaska, remote, sparsely populated, far from the media centers of New York and Los Angeles, and because it happened on Good Friday, when the news cycle was already slow, and because, just a few years later, the Vietnam War would dominate every headline. The earthquake was buried under the weight of history. But here's the truth. The 1964 earthquake was a warning that the Pacific Northwest and California are not safe, that the subduction zone that runs from Alaska down to Northern California is a ticking time bomb, and that bomb is still ticking.
Let's look at the science again. The Cascadia subduction zone, which runs from Northern California up to British Columbia, is structurally similar to the fault that ruptured in 1964. It's locked, it's building pressure, and it's overdue for a major rupture. Scientists estimate that the Cascadia subduction zone produces a magnitude 9.0 earthquake every 300 to 500 years. The last one was in 1700. That's 324 years ago. When that earthquake hits, it will not be a footnote. It will be the largest disaster in American history. It will affect 7 million people. It will destroy cities. It will cause a tsunami that will hit the coast within 15 minutes. There will be no warning, no time to evacuate. The ground will shake for 4 to 6 minutes, and then the water will come. But the 1964 earthquake taught us something else. It taught us that the effects of a subduction zone earthquake are not local, they are global. The wave from Alaska hit Japan, it hit Hawaii, it hit Antarctica. The entire Pacific Ocean felt the pulse of that rupture. And when the next one hits, the entire Pacific Rim will feel it again. So why don't we talk about it? Why isn't this drilled into every schoolchild's head? Because it's uncomfortable, because it's terrifying, because we don't want to think about the ground beneath our feet turning to liquid, about waves that travel at jet speed, about cities that can be erased in minutes, but ignoring it doesn't make it go away. The fault line is still there. The pressure is still building, and the clock is still ticking. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about what you can do. Not just to survive, but to prepare, to understand, to make sure that when the next one hits, you're not caught off guard. Because the 1964 earthquake wasn't a fluke, it was a preview, and the main event is still coming.
The ground beneath your feet is not solid. It never was. The 1964 Alaska earthquake proved that. In Valdez, solid ground turned to liquid and swallowed a town. In Crescent City, a wave that traveled 1,500 miles destroyed 30 blocks and killed 11 people. And the same fault line that caused that disaster is still active, still building pressure, still waiting to rupture again. But here's the thing, we know it's coming. We have the science, we have the data, we have the warning systems. The question is, are we listening? In 1964, there was no tsunami warning system, no sirens, no alerts. People died because they didn't know what was happening. Today, we have the Pacific Tsunami Warning Center. We have deep ocean sensors that can detect a wave before it reaches shore. We have evacuation maps and drills, but none of that matters if you don't pay attention.
The next major earthquake on the Cascadia subduction zone will be a magnitude 9.0 or higher. It will last for 4 to 6 minutes. It will cause widespread liquefaction, landslides, and building collapses. And within 15 minutes, a tsunami will hit the coast. If you are in a low-lying area, you will have no time to drive. You will have to run uphill immediately. The 1964 earthquake killed 131 people. The next one could kill thousands, tens of thousands, because the population has exploded, because we have built cities on unstable ground, because we have forgotten the lesson that Alaska tried to teach us. So here's what I need you to do. First, know your zone. If you live on the West Coast, find out if you're in a tsunami evacuation zone. Memorize the routes, practice them. Second, have a kit. Water, food, medicine, flashlight, radio. Enough for at least 72 hours. Third, don't wait for an official warning. If you feel strong shaking that lasts more than 30 seconds, move to high ground immediately. Don't wait for a siren. Don't wait for a text. Move. And finally, share this knowledge. Talk to your family. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to your friends. Most Americans don't know that the largest earthquake in US history killed people in California. Most Americans don't know that the next one could be even worse. But now you do. If this video taught you something new, if it made you think about the ground beneath your feet, then do me a favor. Hit that like button. Comment below with your state and whether you knew about the 1964 earthquake. Subscribe to this channel and turn on the notification bell. Because we're not done. We're going to keep digging into the disasters that shaped this country. The ones they don't teach you in school. The ones that are still waiting to happen. The ground is shifting, the clock is ticking, and the next wave is already building. Be ready.